So you see this can of White Rabbit. So imagine, imagine for those of you who are watching or listening, imagine a can of White Rabbit, just a can of soda or a can of energy drink. Now, on top of that can of White Rabbit, imagine a turret. All right. Now, that turret is moving around the center ring of that can. Mm-hmm. Now, in a lot of Russian tanks, the ammunition is stored in a carousel around the can lid. So they do that because a lot of Russian tanks have autoloaders. Now,
Steven, maybe you can find some diagrams on the internet of this.
Bit of history about this. Mm-hmm. The Russians always thought they were going to fight in a nuclear, biological, and chemical environment. So that means
since like the Cold War.
Since the Cold War.
Okay.
They assumed that they would always be fighting in a nuclear, biological, and chemical environment. So when they decided to build some of these new tanks, the T-62, T-64, T-72, T-80, these tanks were built with an autoloader instead of a human loader, and there's two reasons why. Mm-hmm. The first is that if you leave out a human loader, then you can make the tank smaller.
Okay.
Because you don't have a person standing up loading shells into the gun, right? And the second reason is that if you're fighting in a nuclear environment, every time the loader opens that breech door, they're going to get the shine from the radiation coming in. So they're going to get juiced up, or at least their right arm is going to get juiced up.
Right.
So
when it's exposed from the tank.
Exposed from opening that tank barrel, and there's radioactivity.
I think that's a good one. The T90 autoloaders. That's nope, not that one. There was a orange one. Yeah, 4K 3D animation.
Yeah, some of those are.
Left. Nope. The orange. Yeah, thing. There you go.
Yeah. So this carousel
Turn
loader.
The audio off.
This particular carousel loader is fully automated. The shell gets pushed in, and then the actual the charge gets pushed in after it. So they split it up into two sections. There's the loading tray coming up, and then the next thing you're going to see is the shell is going to get pushed into the breech.
And this is all happening inside the tank.
This is all happening inside the tank. It's fully automated. It's taken a little while.
Yeah.
So this guy's manually putting the shell in for some reason, but all right, that goes in.
Russians.
And then so the Navy, all right, and now they're manually putting the propellant bag in. So
that's
this
like a
probably
giant
wasn't the best
shotgun
video.
shell.
It is. Oh yeah. Well, that is
Whoa, dude.
So in this case, the autoloader must be broken, but typically that stuff comes up from the bottom of the tank.
Okay.
And it's in this carousel that surrounds the entire vehicle, and so when that vehicle gets hit, the tank pops off. Now, the top of the turret explodes into the air. Usually, well, sometimes.
And this was happening in Ukraine
constantly.
Because the Russians had their tanks built like this.
Yeah, but look, every tank is a trade-off, right? So the Russians.
Oh, this is much better.
Yeah, they use an autoloader. Americans use a 19-year-old with a strong arm. So what does that mean? Well, it means there's another person that has to crew the tank. It means there's another person you have to feed.
Yeah.
It means that you can have fewer tanks, right? Like if you think about it, for every 3 tanks, since there's 3 crew in every tank, a driver, a gunner, and a tank commander, there's 3 crew in every Russian tank, and there's 4 crew in every American tank, the Russians can have an extra tank for the same amount of crew that the Americans have. And that has its own power right there, right?
Right.
So, you're dealing with...
And I'm sure them being smaller is better, right? They weigh less. I'm sure they're a little bit harder to hit. Maybe?
If it's a main gun round, it's going to be a little bit... So the actual size of something like the T-72, which is probably Russia's... It's not the most widely produced tank, probably the most used tank in Russia. If you take something like the T-72, it's about 2/3 the size of the U.S. Abrams. So that was a lot harder to hit back in the days when it was gun on gun. Well, nowadays we have kamikaze missiles. We have weapons like the Javelin, which take a look at the heat source that you've identified, and it locks it into its little computer brain, and then it goes after that tank. It doesn't care how small you are, right? So nowadays, that isn't as big of an advantage as it was. And that's a huge issue for Russia.
What other sort of weapon technicality failures has Russia had during this war? Or what other, like, what's another, like, pain point for them, I guess?
Logistics was a huge pain point.
Yeah.
Logistics. You know, when you first started the conversation, you asked me, like, why does Russia do this, or why were they so bad at what they did?
Yeah.
It's because it always worked before.
Yeah.
You know, Russia has always been able to kind of blunder their way into victory, whether they trained their troops that well or not, just because they can just keep throwing bodies at it and artillery until the problem solves itself. But like South Ossetia, which is a war with Georgia, I mean, they blundered their way around South Ossetia for quite a few weeks and still managed to win. Chechnya, the Battle of Grozny, that was an absolute catastrophe, but Russia came back and they just leveled every single building as on their way in. So it always seemed to work before. Right. Now, logistics in this particular war have been absolutely horrible. You know, Russia just can't seem to get the supplies they need to the front lines. And another big issue is they don't use truck trailers.
Truck trailers?
Truck trailers. Oh, I could talk about truck trailers all day.
What kind of truck trailers are we talking about?
So, for their military, in truck trailer, like the kind of trailer that
like
might go
flatbed?
on, like a flatbed trailer or an additional trailer that can go on a military truck.
Okay.
So if you look at an American truck like an LMTV, light, medium, tactical vehicle, right, or FM, family medium tactical vehicle, family medium tactical vehicles. If you put a trailer on a truck, you double the carrying capacity of the truck, and you only suffer an 8 to 10% fuel cost.
Right.
Well, in Russia, it takes too long to train people how to back up a truck trailer, because backing up a trailer is a skill.
Yes.
That is a skill, and it takes practice.
Yep.
Well, they don't have
time. Do it
time.
a lot here in Florida with boats.
They don't have, yeah, you can imagine, right? So they don't have time to teach people that skill. So they just don't use trailers. So essentially, whenever you see a truck and it's not carrying a trailer, that's half of that truck movement that's just been wasted, right? So that's another big problem, is that Russia just doesn't use truck trailers because they don't have the trained people to operate them.
Right.
So that's the second thing that they're doing wrong. But they're at the point now where they're doing more things right than wrong. And that's a very dangerous situation. Oh, yeah. Well, they figured out how to do on-call artillery. That was something they did not have at the beginning of the war, using like their Orlan 10 drones, spotter drones, to call in artillery and loitering munitions. So they'll take like an Orlan 10 and they'll launch that and they'll loiter above the battlefield and they'll go, okay, there's a Ukrainian position there. Send up three loitering munitions, right? So they send up 3 Lancets. Like, all right, yeah, we got one tank there, okay, send all these 3 toward these targets right here. It's at the point right now in Ukraine where I don't think they can, Russia and Ukraine, both, Russia and Ukraine, they can't put anything greater than a company in one place. And a company is about 110 soldiers or maybe 30 some vehicles. It depends on the organization, but they can't really mass any force. Neither side can mass force because we have such good ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. We have such good ISR that whenever you build up people for an attack, the other side can see it, and they can send loitering munitions or drones to go take out those targets, or artillery, or rockets like HIMARS. So I would find it very difficult. I think it'd be very difficult for Russia or Ukraine to break through their trenches unless there's a major game-changing weapon, because they just don't have, you just can't mass any forces because the enemy can see it, and they can send loitering munitions and rockets right toward that area.